students can submit to our office a request to hold their records. There are reasons that students don't want any of their records released. In other previous institutions, I've had, unfortunately, opportunities to work with students who might be in a witness protection program. Thus, they come in and they want their records. We have the ability for parents to be able to come in with the student. They have to come in with the student to be able to sign a FERPA release that we would then be allowed to present the information to the parent or to whomever they give designation to. So we've outlined those a little bit more here. They will also go into procedures with the form so that students know that they have that right. The one main change that we have made as far, or are recommending, is as far as public information, what we identify as public information. And I'm sorry, I don't have that page right in front of me.
Talk about the directory information?
Yes.
That is on G3.
Okay.
For us, page 2 of the policy.
On the definitions?
Yes.
Yeah, it's page 2,
Okay.
number 2.
Thank you. But what we've asked for is that we've asked to take out current and permanent address. That gives us some angst because we, as the policy had been written, we were allowed to, if somebody called and asked, it was public information, or we could release it to whomever. Given the world in which we live in right at this point in time, was a little apprehensive, and I'm seeing more institutions pulling the public or the mailing address or the current address out of their policies for students not to be able to give that information out in a public way. We can still be able to provide it through IPA requirements or things that when we have certain organizations that are assisting the institution with recruiting students, with communicating with students, but as a general policy, we wouldn't give out student addresses.
So I have a question on page.
Well, I have a question on 2.
Okay, go ahead.
So my question on 2 is on the definition of college official, governing board members. I think this board is pretty clear about what our functions are and how they don't cross the administrative functions. But I'm wondering if putting governing board members in there at some future time might give governing boards the impression that they can go in there and do whatever they want with, they can use these, they can have access to this information pretty easily.
Well, where is
That's
college official used in the body?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Do you have any sense of that?
There is because it's
All over.
it's a broad category that includes those individuals, any employee, board member, or administrator. And I believe that Laura and I, with several other groups, talked about it, and I want to say it was one of the faculty committees asked about that, and we looked at it within the FERPA guidelines that we utilize.
Oh, right.
And it was left in there. I mean, I don't have, but when you use it within the context of the document itself, college official encompasses all of those. Encompasses
That's exactly my fear.
the employee. I understand what you're asking in that one, that somebody would think that they could have, then they would be considered a college official and have access to certain kind
So
of.
as a board member, I could come in and I say to you, I want to see the record for Joe Smith.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this says I can do it because I'm a
Right.
college official.
Yes.
So I think it would make much more sense not to have that.
Okay.
Not to have governing board members listed as a college official.
Mhm. And actually, it's not all SFCC employees. It should be authorized or designated SFCC employees, correct? Which,
That would probably be a good.
Yeah, because not
Definitely.
making you, one of the things that FERPA says is that you need, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is that you need to have a reason why you have access to that particular record. So I think
Right.
Right,
authorized-
that's the key distinction.
So authorized SFCC employees makes sense to
Yeah.
add.
Okay,
I'll take out
strongly
governing board.
recommend that we drop governing board members.
Okay.
Well, I'm unclear on why FERPA has it in there. Is that what you're saying? That when you.
again, FERPA allows institutions, it has the mays and the mights and the may nots. And so it gives you a pretty broad spectrum of what institutions can do. But it leaves it up to the institution to make that determination. I mean, there are institutions that will accept, for whatever reason, their governing boards or their certain other areas within their campus, absolutely. But again, FERPA, the federal guidelines are just that. They give us the mays, the may nots, and the
No, I understand.
mites. So we can make it and we can determine it to what is our preference at the college.
Well, I think under college official, any of these would only be those authorized.
Any of
And I
which,
don't
Any of,
think-
anything in the definition.
In the list, yeah.
Because you don't want student employees.
Well, but our student employees do go through training.
Uh-huh.
They do.
But then
because-
they're authorized. It's
Yes.
not just any student
Right,
employee.
right,
absolutely.
It's not just any administrator. It's not just any consultant.
Yes, ma'am. They all go through a training and they all,
But
Oh.
authorized, but we do not authorize or train our governing board members in that function. So, I'm still pretty adamant that we don't need that in there.
We'll strike it out. Also, we can strike administrators because on our definition for employees includes administrators. Should we rephrase it? College official includes authorized SFCC employees, student employees, attorneys, representatives, consultants, and independent contractors retained by SFCC.
Well, you want to leave administrators in there.
She just said it's
Oh,
under the definition of employee.
Oh, I see.
I think you've gotta make sure authorized modifies every single thing on this list.
okay?
Yeah, you're right.
Well,
Student
then-
employees is
then the
under
whole
there, so I
question
can
comes
take that
down
out
to
too.
how are you
Yeah.
authorized?
Well,
Well, if you
that's-
have college
She's saying
business, then,
You
you
may
know,
should
so
keep
for
as well
example,
as.
student worker works in admissions, those student workers are gonna have to be trained in privacy, and they're gonna have access to confidential information. But
Right,
in many offices, they wouldn't, and just because they're student workers doesn't mean they're automatically privy to that.
Yeah.
Right.
And
And that is the
It is the
expectation,
purpose.
and that would be identified in the procedures, which is the second half of what happens after the policy is approved. Then we develop the procedures and we've cleaned up some of the forms, but we would put that in there that, and they don't, because I'm the sign off on that at this point in time, they don't get access unless they go through the training that I provide for them.
right.
And it's very interesting for our students because they don't even necessarily know that their records are covered by this, even though we're required annually to send out a notification to the students. It's not on their radar. It's not on their radar until
Sure.
something happens, which is fine. I don't need,
Right.
that's one less thing they need to worry about, but they also need to know that they are protected in that manner.
Right.
Absolutely. And of course, times have changed where we don't have faculty who are posting grades on
That's right. with the
on
name.
doors and windows and,
Right.
that kind of thing. So we have
They
transitioned.
all go on Facebook now.
Well, I did have a faculty member, not at this institution, but I did have a faculty member
Better
who posted his grades on Facebook. That was a quick, midnight call.
I guess.
How do we get it off? So us and, I guess it is Facebook who's had to take certain kinds of things off off their agenda. And then there was another question.
Yeah, I had a question about G10Q. So everything, all the student records are stored electronically, and what you're talking about in Q are the paper documents? What? the
Yes, we
college may
still-
destroy.
Yes, we have both sets. We have paper documents, because this was well before scanning. We do have requirements by state law that identify when we're supposed to be able to destroy those records. And in fact, my office is under a huge project right now to destroy records that are more than 7 years old from the student's last time of attendance.
I
the-
thought it was 7, but this says 5.
It should say 7, and I'm sorry, I guess I might have missed that, but it should say 7 years.
Because you archived it,
Right.
and then you destroy the archives at 7.
The only thing that we don't destroy are international student records. And the reason being is because they may not be able to get their academic records from their country because the country may no longer exist. So we don't destroy those ones. But we do look at it very carefully for the students that have not been at SFCC for 7 years.
Okay, so this will change to 7.
And on P, there's adequate, we're comfortable that there's adequate backup for those records to continue to exist.
Yes, ma'am.
Electronic.
Yes, ma'am.
And R, do we really keep transcripts for 100 years?
Yes, sir.
Yours are out there, George.
Golly.
At my previous institution, we have them since the day the college opened.
Is that
1889.
Is that a federal law then? 100 years?
I don't know where that comes from, to be very honest with you, but I mean, I've always known it to be the case.
Uh-huh.
But for registrars, we're pretty hard not to want to destroy records.
You don't want to give up any data.
Yeah, we're not really excited to give up any of that because somebody's going to come back.
At some
You know,
point.
yes, we've had opportunity
My
where,
great-great-grandfather, he went here and
and we have power of attorney to be able to get a copy of his record. So we give them a copy of their record.
Wasn't there a story recently about that? I seem to remember something about some family that came back and wanted some kind of important record that you could find. I have a couple other sort of minor things.
Awesome. Thank you for looking at the policy very well.
Under the policy process, students should have reasonable expectations, page 3. Policy A. Students should have reasonable expectations that their records generally will not be shared. Why do we need generally? It seems to me that descriptor may cause us some problems down the road. When
Well,
somebody says,
but I think it's also then further defined, because generally they're not, but again, we have to be able to have a caveat in there that if we have a campus security issue, if we have a national emergency of some kind, that we need to be able to either get to our students or get to someone for our students that we can do that. Normally, they're protected. There's nothing. But if we run into one of these particular kinds of situations, we will share the information. So we want them to be able to know in what instances would we share that information.
but isn't that covered as only to further
Yes.
important purposes such as assuring campus safety?
I think,
Well,
And
but it's also-
FERPA allows us.
Yes,
right?
and it's also, for example, we do report data to the state in terms of individuals, student records. We may have a data sharing agreement with Workforce Solutions or public schools.
Aren't those in aggregate though?
No, not in all cases. Especially if we want to actually ensure the students are being successful from one intervention programs to another. And so it does follow our FERPA guidelines and expectations there. So I think generally is important to keep in mind because there are exceptions later on in this policy that speaks to under what circumstances we do share.
Okay.
So-
I just thought it was
Yes.
redundant, but maybe it isn't. Let's see, what else? I made a note to myself on that, but I can't quite figure out what it's about. Okay, I'll let that go. Do we have a timeline for when, just general, this is a general question to all of you. Do we have a timeline for how soon after a policy is approved, that we develop procedures?
Within 30 days.
within 30 days.
Okay. Okay. That was my only question.
Okay, I have a couple of perhaps fixes.
Okay.
On G3, number 6, where is identified as a college official or employee, we've already defined college official as an employee. So that's probably redundant.
Okay.
The second one is on G5, line 2.
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm not following you because I'm not on G's.
Page 4.
Page,
Page 2, number 6 for the under definitions.
Page 2, number 6. Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
and then on,
Page 4,
then on page 4.
college officials, great, thank
employee.
you.
Then on page 5, number 4, but it's 5 first.
For the,
Number
Yeah.
4, where it says a college employee, shouldn't that say official instead of employee?
Is that okay with you, Kathleen?
That's fine.
Okay,
That terminology is fine with me.
thanks.
Okay, I think that's it.
Thank you.
Yeah, we can work through to make that consistent
Yeah,
with the policy.
Okay, so what should we do tonight because it's an action item?
it actually shouldn't be an action item. Well, it's a first reading,
Oh,
so
okay. So you'll have it fixed.
we put it on action in case it gets bumped to the evening so that we can present. And you could say it's okay to move forward to
Okay.
the second reading. But in the work session, there isn't action. So if you guys would like
What's on here is an action item, but that's fine. So next meeting.
next meeting.
Yeah, okay. Great, thank you.
Thank you, appreciate you moving me up in the agenda.
Thank you, Kathleen. She worked very hard on this to get it up to date.
You're very welcome.
Okay.
so on that next issue, on the wall grant,
Why is
why
that
is
here
that
on
in
the?
here? Shouldn't it only be in the special request?
Because.
Oh, okay. Good, all right.
Hi. So, yeah, the WildGram was on the agenda early as a special request.
Okay.
Mike unfortunately had to go.
Okay.
So, but the
Oh,
reason that I
bummer.
had brought him in early is because, like many of us, our families run on these extremely tight schedules and he couldn't come to the evening session. So bringing him into the work session was my only opportunity to sort of bring him forward and introduce him to you. So I'm sorry that he wasn't able to stay, but I'm really excited to have this opportunity to share a little bit about Mike with you. So thank you so much for giving me this 5 minutes.
So you'll do it now or you'll do it in the?
I'm gonna do it now. I actually
So
have
you
to.
can wait.
She has to go too.
I have to do too.
Okay.
Highlands is having their orientation and I'm participating in the orientation series. But anyway, back in January, when I was 3 weeks into the position, my assistant Tina injured herself at the higher education center. Tina is in a wheelchair and she has some health challenges, and so her injury was actually quite severe. And Mike was my rock. He was right there with me while we were trying to navigate the extreme excitement of doing what we had to do to get Tina to safety very quickly. And so it was scary. It was pretty overwhelming. There was a significant amount of bleeding that occurred. And I just have to say, like, we go through CPR training and it's wonderful to have those trainings kind of kick in and take over and, call 911. And then that was me. And call Mike, and Mike was there. And so Mike really I was on the phone with the 911 and Mike was putting pressure on the wound and we were doing tourniquets and all kinds of exciting stuff. But I just wanted to say that, like, it's as having the opportunity to lead the HEC, it was an important moment and learning that I could absolutely rely on the people that I have around me to help me, to be there to help me. And especially, I want to praise the safety and security staff because they're all incredible. And I was telling President Rowley earlier this week that the way that they're so effective at what they do isn't because they're big and burly and muscly. It's because they care so much about the people who are on this campus and the people that they work with. And so I told Mike after that incident that, like, I'm so glad, right? Because I know that if anything happens, he is rock solid. He's going to be right there. And I also said that if we needed to do any more of that kind of team building, that next time we should get tattoos. So just thank you for this opportunity to come and talk about, Mike, the emergencies we have, where we have the campus drills on active shooter, but sometimes the things that happen, they're just accidents. And it's just nice knowing that we're a tight enough community that when we need each other, we're absolutely here for one another. And
How was
great.
Tina?
And Tina's great. She's, so she was off work for about 3 weeks, but has come back and is completely recovered. And we're going gangbusters. Over there.
Yeah.
So, thank you so
for
much.
sharing that. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Tell Mike we're sorry that we missed.
Oh, that's okay.
So
So
slow.
was there an environmental issue that Tina had an accident?
There was a cubby under her desk that it wasn't, it was just a pure accident. It's not like, I don't want people to get stressed about liabilities for the college, right? It wasn't that. It was
kind of a freak.
right. She had been taking off her coat and her sleeve got caught on her wheelchair controller. It bumped her into a cubby in her desk.
Oh,
She was already in a wheelchair.
Exactly.
Right.
uh,
It
Yeah.
didn't cause her to be in a
Yeah,
wheelchair.
that was the result of the accident. And so it was just kind of one of those scary things. But the emergency services were there in 7 minutes tops, and everything was absolutely fine. But it's fine because we have good people. So
great.
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Thanks, Megan.
And good luck tonight.
Thank you. Bye.
Okay, the systems appraisal feedback report. Josh
And Joe,
and Jill.
Madam Chair, members of the board, in front of you is the response we received from our systems appraisal. It's called System Appraisal Feedback Report, and Jill and I would like to go over some of the feedback we received and a proposed action items on how to move forward from here. And so with that, Jill, do you want to add something else into that?
Just a little bit of background. So we submitted this massive systems portfolio, as many of you remember, in March. This was the response to it. It's a little challenging, and I think part of the reason that the commission is changing how they approach accreditation. This is under the AQUIP model. So you had to answer to AQUIP prompts, but at the same time document that they were meeting the criteria for accreditation. AQUIP will be sunset. We will no longer be an AQUIP school basically after this site visit next February, because it's going away altogether.
AQUIP is going back.
Yeah, that pathway, that model for accreditation.
Why?
I think a variety of reasons, but one of them being that it's really hard to write to the AQUIP prompts and the criteria for accreditation at the same time. And I think there was a feeling that institutions got too far away from the criteria because they were so focused on the AQUIP methodology. So we hopefully will have an opportunity to choose our next pathway, which is either called open or standard. We won't know that until the recommendation from the site visit team. But
Why do they get to decide?
well, they get to decide if we get to choose or if we have to go to standard. And I lead those, so if you want to go into detail at some point, we can have a conversation about that. But what I'd like to do, what Yash and I would like to do is from 139, look at this plan, talk you through some of the points here, and then if you have questions about specific things in the portfolio and the response. So Yash is going to start out with the first two
Sure.
columns.
So for your pleasure, one of the things that Joe and I have done is read through this document, and actually the version book is even thicker. And what we've done is look at the items that they have highlighted of that was unclear or that the reviewers felt like they need to further clarify, and then come up with a appropriate action to address it. So when we have the reviewers here on ground in February, we will be ready to make sure we are doing these things they want us to do, and that we are accurate in our reflection.
So just to clarify,
Yes.
so this big chart are the responses to the concerns they had in yellow in here.
Manager, yes. Thank you
Our
for that
action
clarification.
response, yes. Now, we did have an opportunity to do a formal letter, which wasn't ready by the time the packet that I put on your system, so you have that as well. And this chart is a combination of what's in here, and then a couple items. We will also have a federal compliance review that I know that we need to attend to, that we wanted to have this action plan model. So I think the one other thing that's important is some of these are already on the strategic plan. We're going to use that model where we developed some leads, and they do a plan and they report in bi-monthly to the president. And so we found that to be really successful here, and so that's what our approach is going to be.
So with that, the first item looks at the co-curricular assessment. One of the things that we have been doing is we've actually started doing a co-curricular assessment last fall, particularly in the area of advising for students who are thinking about taking out loans. And so we have a good process started. One of the things we need to focus on next is to ensure that other co-curricular activities are being actively assessed. So for the fall 2019, we have already met with the folks from the student success area, welcome and advisement area, and asked them to identify possible programs where we could actively assess the student learning outcomes. We've already been sending these individuals and different leaders to assessment conferences, so they should be aware and familiar with it. Some of the areas that they have identified as a possible place to start with includes FYSS program, new student orientation, some potential clubs and activities. Did I miss anything, Joe?
Well, the library, Gal has taken an initiative because she's very active on a national level with the American Library Association, and so they're going to do an assessment project as well. But the idea here is that we're assessing student learning outside the classroom, which is a tough thing to do, but it is a requirement, and so we've got to really hit it hard.
The next item is relating to the general education assessment. One of the things we could have done better, I think, in this case is to make sure that we tell our stories better. For example, we do assess math and English and history pretty actively, which is included in our general education assessment module. But when we talked about it, we talked about it in the context of program learning outcomes rather than general education assessment outcomes. And so what we need to do is continue this work. We have a brand new committee that's led by faculty members. So in this fall, we're hoping to make sure we can collect additional information and demonstrate in the spring when the viewers come on campus.
And what we're using are the essential skills outcomes, those 5 essential skills that have been identified through Gen Ed for the whole state. I can recite them if you want. We're going to start with critical thinking because that goes across all of the college. We've mapped all of our program outcomes to those, and so the report that we presented was based on that mapping. But they didn't really think that that told the story in a way that they were convinced we were assessing these general education outcomes. So I think the way we present the data in the future will be modified, and we'll certainly be able to tell our story better. And, we have the challenge of a lot of gen ed classes are taught by adjunct faculty. And so we've got to get this up and running also in those courses. So that's part of the work the committee will be doing.
So we've actually talked to our HLC liaison, and every time what she keeps repeating is that these written reports are different than when people are on the ground, because then we could actually have this conversation. We don't see it. Yes, here it is. And so that usually clears up a lot of these different concerns.
So do they interview people
Yes.
when they're here?
Yes.
And did they not find that to be sufficient?
They were coming.
Oh, they haven't.
This is the response to our written report,
I got it.
which, remember, I think I said was 39,900 and some odd words plus all the attachments. So we'll also tell you that we're not entirely sure they opened all the attachments. It's a lot of stuff to wade through.
Oh.
You've done this before.
Skim that one.
Yes. So for 3B on human and cultural diversity, I think we told a lot of activities that were going on. We didn't, again, tell the story as well about what's going on in the classroom. We pointed to things like in many of the medical programs, there are outcomes about communication with community members of all sorts and with other health professionals that we think go to human and cultural diversity, but they didn't seem to think that we answered that as well as we should. And
And
so
this-
we're going to really focus on how we can demonstrate that, because we're certainly doing it both in the classroom and outside.
This is one of the examples why ACOP we think is going away, because on the ACOP category, they ask about it in the context of student learning outcomes and doesn't let us talk about it in the context of what are we doing to make sure that the human and cultural diversity is being addressed on the campus. So when I looked at the books, I was a little confused at their particular response. We sort of looked at the questions and we realized it was part of the issue was the crosswalk from ACOP to core components.
To the criteria. And those 5 criteria are things that all HLC institutions have to do. Faculty credentials is something that we continue to work on. It's been on the strategic plan in the past. It's a lot of moving parts because they changed how faculty are qualified. And so getting all that documentation into a simple repository has been a little bit of a challenge, but we're making progress on it. We did an audit yesterday. I don't have the results of that, but we'll do another one probably in early November. We're also planning to invite at least one peer reviewer to come on and do a practice visit on those areas that we need work to see how they think. So we'll talk to somebody probably that I've done peer review with and contract them to come in and do a practice visit.
So that's the HR file that has all the faculty.
So the transcript, the one of the big things is the deans and associate deans fill out a form that says, okay, so-and-so graduated from St. John's. They have a degree that is a liberal arts degree. They're teaching general education English. And the guidelines say that they have to either have a degree in the subject area or a degree in 18 hours. Well, we got them to agree that the Johnnies could teach comp and rhetoric, but they can't teach other kinds of English. And so all that documentation has to go on a form, and then their transcript or the welding journeyman license or any of that. And so it's a lot of moving parts to get organized. Syllabi is something that I added here. When we turn in the federal compliance report, which I'm thinking will be about 6 weeks before they get here, we'll be asked to provide a selection of course syllabi. And we've gotten rather far away from using a template. And so I'm trying to bring us back to making sure that the outcomes are the same as the ones on the master syllabus, all of that sort of thing. I just got back from testifying at a hearing at the commission for a campus that really had lost control of its curriculum and its course and program outcomes because they hadn't maintained control over those source documents. And so I want to make sure that we're in good shape.
So who says this is a good syllabus?
So what they're looking
Who says
for,
this is a good syllabus?
yeah, it's not, so what they're looking for is, does it have certain elements? It has to have the legal description of the course, which is what is in the catalog. It has to have the number of credit hours. It should have the faculty name, contact information, and office hours if it's a full-time faculty. It should have how many credit hours. If it's a 3 credit hour course, they're going to look and give an opinion as to whether it has 3 credit hours worth of work based on the Carnegie rule, which is 1 hour classroom time, 2 hours at home. And so, they're not getting way down in the weeds on it, but they're glancing at it to see, well, that's a 1 credit course and you're asking them to do all this. That may not really go on. And that's all relates back to Title IV and consumer protections for students. So that's what that is. We are required to turn in the hyperlink for our credit hour policy, and we don't have a credit hour policy per se. We have a definition in the catalog, which Thomasina noticed was incorrect, and so we have corrected that in the new catalog. Somebody did the math wrong. And we have drafted a credit hour policy. It will be coming to you early. Yash, I think you're doing the last one.
Sure. So professional development is another thing I think we've been doing a pretty good job of. We've been sending people to conferences that directly relates to their expertise and their specific student support service areas, as well as for faculty and their disciplines. We have 2 campus-wide employee development day. that has been designed in the past by faculty and staff members' involvement. Most recently, we've had a whole training with NAEP to come and talk about culturally relevant teaching models within their classrooms. So one of the things they really pointed out was really more of an AQUIP issue than a criteria issue. So we think that was one of the challenges. We just want to make sure that we further our process for the current professional development piece through the foundation, so that's a little more effective, so we could demonstrate to the commission that people are getting those funds on time.
Just so you could see what our writing is like, this is, you should take a copy of the chart that we included in the systems portfolio, so that you can kind of see, and
Yeah.
everything in blue is a link.
So one of the things is we provided, those are examples that we provided because space is limited, right? But then they were like, well, you're missing this particular institution. Not every single department is represented here. This is all you're doing. And our response is that it's not meant to be a finite list. We were trying to provide examples because they're not really supposed to be worried about that level of details unless there's some sort of serious issue there. So this is one of the situations I think that could be cleared up once they come here and we demonstrate all the different information items. So we just want to make sure we have a strong handle on other professional development and our ability to demonstrate that we are actually doing it.
So they'll have a series of meetings that are topic specific, and then they'll have an open forum for faculty, an open forum for classified staff, and an open forum for administrators. And they'll probably ask about professional development in those group meetings. And they'll say, we don't want anybody who's not a classified staff member in that session. So we'll all be banned essentially for those sessions. They will likely want to have a meeting with you, but it'll just be one meeting. Sometimes that's lunch, sometimes that's dinner, sometimes it's a meeting. But they don't spend a lot of time, frankly.
It's a 2-day visit, so they pack a lot of things one after another.
And is that the only visit they had, just that one visit?
Yes, it is, unless you get in trouble. So, as you've read in the newspaper, some folks down the road will have had follow-up. So just so
So on professional development,
Mhm.
how do we do, I think it's required, the whole sexual harassment training that.
So Terrence,
I think
maybe you
that's
can help
required,
answer
but I'm
this.
not sure.
I'm sorry.
How we do professional development for sexual harassment and workplace issues like that.
Specifically for those topics,
Mhm.
those are addressed in new hire orientation. But we don't have a separate curriculum, if you will, or class for those topics.
We have had occasionally before Terrence got here, but it's not an every year thing.
My memory was that every year, the entire campus was supposed to go through that kind of a process. And at the institution where I was, people had to sign up that they had done that. But I guess maybe, I don't know.
I would defer to,
software, the law room.
Pardon?
We had software, law room modules that we all had to go through.
That
Yes.
people can access.
Mhm.
But are
They-
they required to access?
We did have that. I don't know whether we still have access to that.
I will have to find out.
Isn't it annual?
Yeah.
A requirement?
again, I would defer to the HR expert.
That's something that I will have to look into in terms of the requirement, the annual requirement for those acknowledgements.
Thank you.
So on the back side, we have a pretty robust academic program review process. You all were the beneficiaries of reading some of those, I think, 2 years ago, where we had folks come in and talk about them. When the committee reads those and evaluates those, we make a recommendation to Yash and Margaret of either continuance or remediation/discontinuance. Some programs have been put on remediation. It's been kind of ad hoc. We do have them give a report, but it hasn't been templated. It hasn't been really documented in a way that it's really strong. And so what we're going to do is take in that software and have a formal plan written with certain elements. And then that's between the program and the dean. But then they come back after the 2-year remediation period and make a presentation. We had an excellent one from ceramics just a few weeks ago. Really phenomenal work that he had done in 2 years. And so we just need to formalize that process and the documentation a little bit more. But they liked what we were doing as far as the actual program review. We will be moving to a 5-year cycle on that. One of the things that EQUIP has is an 8-year cycle for accreditation. Most other is 10, so we'll be moving to a 10-year cycle. So they'll come in 2020 and probably not again until 2030, unless we're on the standard pathway and then we do it separately.
Standard was when you're not doing so good?
No, standard is just a more structured pathway, and some institutions choose to be on it. But if you have any kind of follow-up, especially any kind of sanction, you have to do this. The new open pathway does allow for the kind of action projects that we did with EQUIP, but it's a big 3-year project, and the project goes to peer reviewers for approval before you start working. It'll be new for everybody. So on academic integrity, this again is sort of this decentralized thing that we've done. So the schools, the deans, associate deans, and the faculty have been handling academic integrity issues for years. And unless it's so egregious that we've got to bring it to the student conduct officer, we've left it that way. Well, as such, then we couldn't really report very good stats on it. And so before we actually even turned in the portfolio, the faculty became interested in this, presented to Faculty Senate. They have started to design a new form for the conduct software where the conduct officer won't take action. It'll still be handled out, but we'll document it. And then if there are multiple violations, because they don't know, liberal arts doesn't know if the same person's doing it somewhere else, then we'll have a better way to track it. So again, this is all building tracking systems.
So the document is drafted and ready to go to Julie Deisler is taking it to Faculty Senate as soon as the faculty is back. It is a Maxient form, just like our other, reporting forms. And so it will go in the system and just be filed there so that we have a way of tracking, as Jill said,
Right.
the incidents so that we know if somebody's had multiple incidents of plagiarism, for example. And mostly this is plagiarism, some other types of cheating, like cheating on a test or something like that. But most often it's plagiarism. And faculty want to be able to deal with that at the classroom level. And I respect that, but we need to have a centralized place to record those incidents so that we know if we've got somebody repeating the violation.
And my understanding is faculty really want to know about the repeat violations.
Absolutely.
We have no way to do it. So
Mhm.
this has been a really faculty-driven process when we brought it to their attentions. Faculty evaluations. The reason this is on here is because they kind of got put on hold last year because of the CBA. And we had done a really hard push, got all of the full-time faculty evaluated 2 years ago. It kind of got put on hiatus last year. Yeah.
So last year, what kind of got put on hold was adjunct faculty evaluations. So year before last, we did full-time evaluations. We did those for everyone. It is time this year to do those again. Last year, we did some adjunct faculty evaluations, but there is a peer observation portion of that faculty are to be involved in, observing their peers, and we hit a snag with that in the collective bargaining process. So I think now we're on the other side of that, and we can be a little more organized in the way that we conduct the adjunct faculty evaluations. And so they some of them did happen last year, but we've not been able to keep to the schedule that we developed for ourselves because of the.
And generally, are those evaluations, both of faculty and adjuncts, annual?
It had been in the policy to be annual for faculty. I don't think.
It's every 2 years.
But it's, with the collective bargaining now, it's every 2 years. Annual is just really too many moving parts to handle, to be honest with you. And some institutions go 3, 4, 5 years. It depends on whether you're tenure or de facto tenure. There's all sorts of things that happen. But I will say this, George, the process that we have was developed through 2 EQUIP action projects, and very much faculty designed it and then brought it to the administrations. It's a good process. Contributions to students' experience.
3E. Yeah, this is the one when we talk to our liaison. They say, good old 3E, and just shakes their head. In part because it's going to go away. One of the things we don't really do is make any specific claims within the website about what is it that we're going to provide if they go through these programs. We do generally provide workforce programs and transfer to 4 years, and that's sort of implicit rather than explicit. And so one of the things we can do is provide the data to show them that they're all 89% of our students, once they graduate, go to either a 4-year institutions or find a work within our communities. And so we just need to do a better job of telling this story.
So where do things like the master's program fit in, or the leadership program that Ernest runs, or?
I mean, those are things that could potentially fit into right under here as
Right.
other evidence. Yes.
And they'd be great examples, because those students really, they're really developed
Yeah,
in a
so-
year's time.
This is it was really an issue of the AQUIP versus the criteria,
I see.
translation kind of things.
But we did put Thomasina on this because as the new associate vice president for student success, she manages a lot of the folks who are doing those extra contributions, trio and all that. They all fall under her. And so she will help us move forward with really documenting that well. And I think there are explicit claims that many 4-year institutions make. I don't think there are a lot of explicit claims that community colleges make outside of the classroom experiences, because so many of us are commuter.
Yeah,
And
but
so
that's one of
we
this
do.
institution's strengths, it seems to me, that ought to be highlighted.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's what we'll probably do.
I'm sure we'll get Todd involved with the website and telling it a little better there as well. Staffing capacity.
He's smiling almost.
It's a funny smile.
Involved.
This is another one of those things that we just have to tell our stories. After we saw this review, I just looked on the data through iPads, and we could clearly demonstrate that we have sufficient number of staff compared to the students' enrollment. Matter of fact, we have a lot more support for our students than other institutions. And so I plan to work very closely with Thomasina and parents to make sure that that's clear when that review is coming out.
Advisory committees.
So advisory committees, one of the things, this was not one of those items that was listed in our feedback. However, we feel that this is very important to make sure that we could actually demonstrate that we regularly do meet with advisory committees. Programs that require advisory committees, like their sub-accreditation programs, tend to be very strong, particularly in the healthcare areas. We just want to make sure that we could demonstrate that the career technical area and other areas, and potentially in arts, do regularly meet, and there's minutes recorded so that when they come here on campus, we could say, here's the evidence. And that's what it's all about.
And then the last one on strategic planning. Want me to do it? So when we talked to Stephanie, who's our vice president liaison at the commission, we talked about how our strategic plan is not on a cascading model, it's on a cross-functional team model. We had evidence of strategic planning so well embedded throughout this portfolio. We were really surprised to get this.
Yeah.
All of those reports, the annual reports. This is where we're wondering if there was a little reading fatigue, because this is covered in 5C and 5D, and 5D is the last criterion. And it may be, Stephanie thought maybe they didn't understand the model that we use here. We don't really know, but because they brought it up, we wanted to be open about it and put it on here, and again, strengthen. I think it's our methodology. In fact, Yash and I felt challenged enough that we're going to present at the HLC annual meeting next year, assuming they accept our proposal, on how we do this cross-functional team strategic planning.
We're both seeing through our review of national community colleges under HLC that people seem to be using strategic planning as a checking the box activity rather than a tool for improvement.
Yeah.
And we think that there's a real room for improvement there by talking about our experience. And our strategic planning process has even been recognized in peer-reviewed journals and national conferences. So we just need to just have a better conversation with the person who comes here, the group that comes here, and say, but this is how we do it.
Yeah, some of it was sort of baffling. Did you not open the annual reports and those kinds of things? I honestly don't know.
So our, moving forward, as Joe said, what our hope is to have, our plan is to have one practice sessions in the fall, and depending how that goes, probably do another one during the spring convocation. So that people, like, more practice is always better in terms of getting people ready so they know how it's going on, and that way we could make sure we have a very strong visit.
So when you say a practice session, that's with the people who have the responsibility, the leads for each of these areas.
And staff and faculty members.
Right.
So what we'll probably do, I've trained an awful lot of peer reviewers out there because I lead these teams and I've been doing this since 2007, but there will be a calendar established of the planned meetings. And we will ask the person who comes in to do the practice to focus the calendar on the stuff in this feedback report, because I don't think one person can do a full 2-day visit. I've done those consulting jobs before too. And then they'll develop questions. I always go in with a set of questions. I may not stick with every question, but my teams have, okay, it was brought up here that, your documentation of an advisory committee minutes was weak or whatever. Tell us about that or show us where and how you do that. And they may pick a particular program. Oh, welding, you're a CTE program. What's your advisory committee look like? Just to give you an example.
Yeah, can I see the evidence?
Yeah, they're really looking for evidence that we're in compliance. All the AQUIP stuff goes out the window for the site visit. It will all be focused on the criteria for accreditation. And I think I'll probably brief you all on that in more detail as we get a little closer to the visit. The criteria that we have now have gone through revisions, and the new ones, when we said 3E is going away, will take place probably September 1st of 2020. So we're still under the old ones. They're not substantially changed, but like faculty qualifications was in there in 2 or 3 different places. So there a lot of feedback. Josh and I gave feedback on improving, making them more clear, defining some terms like persistence. Is persistence fall to fall? Is retention fall to fall? So those kinds of things. Yeah, and we'll spend some time with you.
Great.
My experience with the strategic planning process is that often when the visitors come through, they will ask people who have nothing to do with strategic planning, what are you doing in strategic planning? Or how do you relate to strategic planning? And it's like, oh, well, somebody does that. I'm not involved with that at all. So it might be useful to have some conversations with faculty and staff about, this is your role in strategic planning. This is how your department works strategic planning.
In addition to that, as the staff senate, I'm going to put it on a different hat now, staff senate co-chair, the staff senate developed a new, as you might remember, evaluation process. And as part of that, there's some goal setting, and staff, I don't know about faculty, are asked to align their goals with either if there's a divisional strategic plan or the institutional one, and we actually give a link in the form to the institutional one. So we're hoping at least all staff have had a little bit of a conversation about it, but we'll stress that as well. And that goal setting is scheduled for the first quarter. So between July and the beginning of October, we'll be having conversations.
Thank you.
Okay, anything else on that?
Sure. Or if you have any other specific questions, if you have a chance to read it.
You guys did a nice job with this.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It was really impressive.
Thank you.
Okay, we should probably eat and then do strategic planning.
Thank you.
Okay.
Eat through strategic planning.
Yes.
Everything gets improved with food, so yeah.
All right. You're on.
Oh,
Oh,
Is it over?
No.
Oh,
We're gonna
no.
eat and work.
We're just taking a brief break. Keep going.
George, you always stop and
yes.
what that is. Looks like
Till they sit down, yeah.
So I'm talking about this very long spreadsheet, which might be a little challenging to handle along with food, but we'll do our best.
I don't know where that is.
That was right before the agenda, the regular meeting.
Oh, here. Oh, here it is. Okay. Okay, take it away.
Our current strategic plan ends as of next summer. It's time to start a new planning process for the 2025 strategic plan. For those of you who were here in 2013, you may remember what that process was like. At that point, it was pretty condensed, but I want to walk you through what we're proposing for this process. And it would actually extend through the academic year this year. And my hope is, to your point about the accreditation team wanting to know who knows what about the strategic plan, my plan is for everybody on campus to have a very clear idea about what's happening with strategic planning through this process, in addition to finishing up our current strategic plan, which is going to be ongoing at the same time. So we've got a lot going on this year. But this is the proposal. Just so you're aware, I've been working over the summer with a small working group of staff and faculty and students just to put this together and also get some other input from them about how we might best get the involvement of students and faculty and staff throughout the year. They come up with some really great, really creative ideas. So I'm hoping we're going to be able to put those into place, or some of those, and that'll be in another level of detail than what this is. This is really the big overview. So if you want to just look through this, the activities that are in that first column are actually repeated on every page. So there's just one set of activities. It's just they didn't all fit. There wasn't enough columns to lay the whole timeline out. So that first chunk of green that you see at the top is really the working group and what they've been doing over the summer and what they're going to be doing for a couple more weeks now. And that's, like I said, creating a plan to get feedback from the stakeholders. They're going to make a plan for how to communicate with not only the campus but the community through this year. They'll also give us some feedback on the environmental scan, which again, if you were here in 2013, you might remember that was a collection of data about the college and about the community that will really inform this process and give people the data that they need in order to make some decisions about where they think we need to be heading as an institution.
So on that, I understand looking internally, but what are you planning in terms of community national trends that maybe we ought to be paying attention?
I'm glad you bring that up, because that's the exact feedback you gave me 8 years ago when we first gone through the process. So I'm ready. So since then, we've been really actively involved with national best practice organizations like Achieving the Dream. And so we have a high level information about information about what the best community colleges nationally are doing. We plan to share that in our environmental scan information about what other schools are doing and my hope is that people can look at some of that information and then realize we're not that actually far off from being there. We just need to make the final stretch, the final soar, if you will, to get to that point. So that's definitely going to be in there. And another reason why we made this a year-long process is because we received feedback last time that it was a little bit too condensed. So one of the first proposals that Julie came up with was really talking with that working group to make sure that it actually meets everybody's expectation in terms of time.
And so in addition to that, though, I mean, I understand the Achieving the Dream schools and all that, but it seems to me that it's really useful to talk about societal things that are workforce probably has been one of the important ones. But in addition to that, if you think outside the box of what a community college does, what are some of those things that the society is pushing or that the society is moving toward that maybe we have to start to pay attention to?
Yep, and we'll definitely include that in our environmental scan. So thank you for that feedback.
And how do we determine what goes into the environmental scan? Are we looking at only issues in our current strategic plan or?
No, I think we're going to be looking at, so the environmental scan is sort of designed to look at, of course, internal issues, but also external issues,
Right.
kind of like what Board Member Romero was talking about. So,
Yeah,
um,
kind of those best practices
yeah,
nationwide.
also,
and
you know, I mean, if you think
what's
about it,
happening,
we've been
trends are.
focusing on non-academic barriers and what people are doing.
Mhm.
You know, we know societally, we're talking about more civic engagement, for example. So all these comprehensive things, including what are some of the industries outside of higher education doing to improve their performances, and can we actually incorporate it in our practices so our students benefit, our community benefit. So we plan to sort of touch on these different areas. The challenge is to try to figure out how can we make sure the information is concise enough, or maybe in bits and pieces enough that people actually have the time to absorb and learn from those different information.
I'm actually really interested in looking more deeply into what our partner organizations in the community are doing, what they see as the highest needs, how we can work together to address needs. I really want to explore those kinds of relationships that obviously, I mean, we have, but are there ways that we can build on them even further through our strategic?
You know, we're hoping that we could partner further with a collective impact group that's been happening in Santa Fe that looks at really birth to career as a spectrum and see what are they saying and how can we make sure that we're working together towards a common vision of a stronger community.
And when I think of those things, so we have the Midtown campus and our community has said higher education is one of the priorities from that. How does that fit into our strategic plan so we start thinking about how we align ourselves with what our community has said they want there and what's our part in that?
Yeah, one of the questions might even be, do we want to, and not to say we're going in this direction, just to clarify, do we want to start offering 4-year degrees in the healthcare area? I don't know, but some community colleges nationally has taken away the word community. What does that mean to us? You know, like CNN has gone through that CNN route from ATVI. So like, you know, these are different kinds of questions that I think we should ask and make sure that we have a sort of a shared vision to make sure that we're meeting the needs.
And when you do that, I mean that one of the things that community colleges in the push to workforce have gone so deeply into skills training that we have forgotten, and it's coming back up now, but it's coming up slowly. We have forgotten how important the general education things are, how important it is for students to have other skills besides their technical skills.
Yeah, thank you.
And it's easy for people to not see that because they're focused on how do you get a job? Well, how you get a job is partly, you know, how do you live your life?
So if I may, I mean, part of the way we're addressing that is by aligning the program outcomes with these 5 essential skills: communication, information and digital literacy, quantitative reasoning, critical thinking, and personal social responsibility, and assessing those so that they have to be taught.
But in addition, you need good writing skills. You need to be able to read a book. You need to be able to understand art. There are things that really are important that we kind of let go by the wayside.
You need to know about your democracy.
Yes.
Absolutely. Civics courses.
This is all really great feedback. I appreciate this. Again, going back to the list, the next one, initial meetings with community stakeholders addresses your comment for me, Keith, about just beginning to explore what's going on in the community. President Rally is out there doing that, some of that already. And I hope to be out there as well, beginning to get a little better sense of what's happening and where we might fit that into our strategic planning process. We then hope to finalize the environmental scan, once we get that information solidified, we'll bring that to you. And hopefully really begin this process of this new strategic planning cycle there about the time of convocation. So we'll have some sessions there and
The spring convocation?
no, actually.
Fall?
Yes.
Wow. Wow. A month away.
Yes, in order for, it's kind of, we're kind of working, from back to front in order to have a plan that's in place and ready to begin implementing, by next August. And not wanting to condense it in the way that it was in the past. We're pulling it all the way back to August. Again, trying to get as much, more than anything, student, input this time. I really am focusing on what are the ways that we can get students involved and hear their voice in the process. And so that's the reason for expanding it. But yes, that does mean it's starting really quickly. At that point, we'll need to form an institutional planning committee, which may include some of the folks that I've been working with over the summer, but which really include some others as well. And we'll get that group involved in really kicking off the campus feedback sessions and the community sessions, which I'm expecting those things to last through January. And then the idea then is that there would be a little bit of time in February to begin to consolidate all that information, come up with a draft, and then a couple of months where it can go, back out to the community, it can go through shared governance, get feedback, make revisions, bring it to executive team, there's a whole like back and forth section where we're getting feedback and really making improvements. And then in order to have it again ready to implement in August, there's some work that needs to happen at the end of the spring semester before faculty and students leave. And so even before the final plan is approved by you, I'm expecting there to be some legwork that happens to begin to identify the teams that are going to work on goals, begin to identify strategies and draft action plans, just to get that piece moving before everybody's gone for the summer. And then again, the final plan would hopefully come to you in June. And then we would be just making the final revisions to those action plans and getting it ready to roll in August. So that's the very.
So last year, or last time around, I remember we hired contractors to kind of help us with the external community. Are we planning on doing that again, or are we going to in-house?
Our expectation, you can jump in if you want to, Yash, is not to contract out. We did not budget for that, partly because my position was not a position that was in place when this happened in 2013. It all fell on Yash.
Well, not all, but yes, a lot of people work on it too, but it was a very condensed process. Julie has done such a fantastic job of moving the strategic planning process forward on this institution that we feel confident in our ability to reach the community. And we're going to be relying on our community partners to help us with it, because for a true strategic plan to be effective, it needs to be really a community process of building partnership and relationships and working together towards that end.
I'm also hoping, that we can partner on a lot of the community work, but at the foundation as well. As they're out there, as they're doing things, that we're bringing people to campus, I'm hoping that we can really work together.
And I'd love to be helpful if I can to you on any of the economic development and business community, making sure that those partners.
We're counting on it. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
There is a foundation member that you might want to interact with. She was helping the foundation board kind of put together a planning process. Wei Chen, her name is, and she does this all over the country, and she's very good at it. So she might be somebody that you could engage through the foundation, so you don't have to spend money.
Thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, plus a link with the foundation would be good.
Yeah, it just makes sense that we should be coordinated.
Absolutely.
and Josh and I discussed this as well as Julia. We're going to begin the master planning process next year. And Nick's on board with this as well. In Josh's talk, we're going to try and make sure that we marry the two documents, the two master plans, two strategic plans, and the master plan, and make sure that they crosswalk each other in terms of our strategic goals and in terms of the college's accomplishments towards master plan. So we'll make sure that they both look to each other and they're both fluid with each other as a final product.
Great idea.
Anything else?
You'll be seeing a lot of me.
Yeah, good. Thank you.
Very good.
It's Julie's year. So do we need a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, motion carried.
Motion.